Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive where we'll be exploring the world of child prodigies and the always complicated world of relationships.
Sounds intense.
It is. And to guide us through it all, we're turning to John Green's An Abundance of Katherines.
Such a great choice for this topic. It's funny on the surface, but underneath, Green really digs into some deep questions about identity, finding your purpose and dealing with those expectations that come with, well, being really smart.
Yeah, and our main character, Colin Singleton, is the perfect example of that. This guy, fresh out of high school, certified prodigy, obsessed with anagrams.
Obsessed.
Oh yeah, and get this, he's had 19 girlfriends, all named Katherine.
Wow, 19. That's a lot of Catherines. Okay, but what I find really interesting is how Green sets up this paradox.
How so?
Colin's brilliant with words, no doubt, but his talent, the anagrams, they're almost presented as like comically useless.
So true. It's like he can take any word apart and find all these hidden meanings, but when it comes to his own love life, he's totally lost.
And, that's a real struggle for a lot of gifted people. They excel in one very specific area, but it doesn't just automatically make everything else in life easy.
Right, like being a math whiz doesn't guarantee you'll be a smooth talker.
Exactly. And often that special talent doesn't really fit into how society defines success or purpose.
It does make you wonder, what happens when your amazing ability doesn't actually lead to the fulfillment you thought it would?
It's a question a lot of people grapple with for sure.
And speaking of not getting what you expect, Colin's post-breakup routine, let's just say it's unique.
Oh, yeah, it's classic Colin.
Retreating to his room, total misery, won't eat, the whole 9 yards. It's almost funny, but you can feel the rawness of it.
It's like he's looking for logic and heartbreak, which is kind of impossible.
Right.
He turns to his anagrams, those familiar patterns, as a way to cope.
Makes sense. And then you have Hassan, his best friend, trying to offer a more spiritual solution. He's like, find faith in God, man.
And Colin, being Colin, compares faith to believing he can fly to space on giant penguins.
It's such a Colin thing to say.
Green uses that humor to explore these really deep questions about faith, about finding meaning, and how we deal with the unknown, especially when life throws you a curveball.
Absolutely. Like even when your heart's broken, there's still room for laughter, for questioning, for making sense of it all. And speaking of making sense of things, Colin is obsessed with Archimedes and his whole Eureka moment.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for him.
He wants that kind of breakthrough, that huge discovery so badly. But you can tell he feels like a failure underneath it all.
He has been labeled a prodigy, but he hasn't actually created anything, made his mark on the world.
It's the difference between the prodigy who's great at learning and the genius who creates.
Exactly.
And maybe that's the heart of Colin's journey, figuring out what kind of genius he's meant to be.
Could be.
But let's go back to his first love, Katherine the First, daughter of his tutor.
Ah, yes, Katherine the First.
Their first kiss is classic John Green, so
Yeah.
beautifully written.
How so?
Colin compares her lips to the feeling of winter.
Wow.
It's so sensory. And it captures how bittersweet first love is, especially for someone like Colin.
Makes sense.
But it also kind of sets the stage for his pattern of heartbreak. And then there's this whole theory he develops, the rejection minimization theorem. Basically, he says the girl should always be the one to initiate the kiss.
That sounds calculated.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it shows how deep his fear of rejection runs and his need for control.
Remember, he's a prodigy. Used to succeeding.
Right.
Love. That's something you can't control, can't predict, and it throws him off completely.
Which leads us to Katherine the next, who, unfortunately for Colin, doesn't care about his anagrams.
Oh, no.
She dumps him.
Ouch.
Which sends him on a road trip with Hassan to, wait for it, Gutshot, Tennessee.
Gutshot, Tennessee. What a name.
I know, right?
It's the perfect setting for Colin's journey, though. He's leaving behind everything he knows, all those Catherines, all those expectations. It's a chance to break free and maybe discover something new about himself.
It's like a clean slate.
He gets sad.
And in Gutshot, they meet Lindsay Lee Wells, their tour guide, who also happens to be the only girl Hassan's ever dated.
No way.
And guess what?
Her name's Katherine.
Her name's Colin.
You're kidding.
I'm serious. Talk about awkwards. And to top it all off, Hassan introduces Colin to Lindsay's boyfriend as the other Colin.
Green is a master of these funny, unexpected situations.
He really is.
But there's also something deeper going on, I think. Those comparisons to the other Colin just fuel Colin's insecurities.
Like he's not good enough.
Yeah, like he's constantly trying to prove he's worthy of love, of recognition.
That need for validation can be so strong.
It can be.
And on this road trip, Colin's obsession with understanding relationships takes a mathematical turn. He decides he's going to create a theorem that can predict the outcome of any relationship.
That sounds very Colin. Applying logic and order to something as messy as love.
It's so him. But there's a vulnerability to it too, you know?
In what way?
He thinks if he can crack the code of human behavior, he'll finally understand why he keeps getting dumped. Maybe even avoid heartbreak in the future.
It's like he's searching for a formula for happiness.
Exactly. And then there's Lindsay. She's way more than just a quirky tour guide. She has this whole complex backstory. She was bullied in middle school, transformed herself into the most popular girl in town.
Wow, that's quite a change.
It is. And it makes you think about what it means to be authentic in a world that often rewards just fitting in.
It's a question we all face, right? Do we wear the mask or do we show up as our true selves?
It's a constant struggle.
Yeah, it is.
And speaking of struggle, Colin meets Katherine Lane, a potential love interest, but
But?
his heart's not really in it. He's still hung up on Katherine tonight.
Of course, he hasn't moved on.
Nope. He's holding on to this idealized version of her, which is preventing him from really connecting with anyone else.
It happens. We cling to the past, to what we think we lost, and it keeps us from experiencing something new.
And in a moment of weakness, Colin calls Katherine the Naiance.
Oh.
Yeah, and she rejects him, firmly. Which leads to this really painful realization for Colin. The pain of missing someone can actually be stronger than the love he felt for them.
That's a tough lesson to learn.
It is. And Colin's struggles go beyond heartbreak. His theorem, the one he's been working so hard on, it gets a snag.
What happened?
It fails to predict the outcome of his relationship with Katherine III.
It's almost like the universe is telling him love is not a math problem, Colin.
Right. And to make things even worse, he can't even remember if he was the dumper or the dumpy in that relationship.
So his whole calculation is off.
Completely. So naturally, he calls Katherine III to get things straight.
What'd she say?
She drops a bomb. He was the dumper.
Whoa, that changes everything.
It does. All this time, he's seen himself as the heartbroken one, the one who always gets left behind. Now he has to face the fact that he's capable of causing that same pain.
That's a big realization.
It is. And that's when things take a wild turn. We've got a hog hunt, a brawl, a serious groin injury.
Wait, what? A hog hunt?
Oh, yeah. It's like Green throws everything at Colin just to see how he'll react.
And how does he react?
Well, that's a story for our next deep dive. Stay tuned.
So last time, we left Colin nursing his wounds and starting to build a real friendship with Lindsay.
Yep. But remember, Lindsay's mom, Hollis, she's still up to something shady with those buried boxes.
Right. Lots of unanswered questions there.
And of course, Colin, being Colin, can't let a good mystery go unsolved. But before we get to that, we got to talk about his theorem.
Ah, yes, the theorem. Still going strong.
Oh, yeah. He's collecting data from everyone in Gutshot, trying to fit their lives into his grand equation of love.
Classic Colin. Always searching for that predictability. He even tries to run Lindsay through the theorem, which I gotta say she finds pretty fun.
She totally calls him out on it.
Yeah.
But the whole thing kind of backfires when he realizes he can't even predict the outcome of his own relationship with Katherine III.
The universe is like, nice try, Colin, but love doesn't work that way.
Exactly. It's this reminder that logic and reason have their limits, especially when it comes to matters of the heart.
Even for a genius like Colin.
Right. And remember, he can't even remember if he was the one who dumped Katherine III.
Pet memory lapse is so interesting, though. It shows how we twist our own memories to protect ourselves.
To fit the story we've created about ourselves.
Exactly. Colin wants to believe he's always the victim, the one who gets dumped. It's easier that way.
Less painful than facing the truth.
For sure. But he does get the truth, finally, from Katherine III herself.
Was he the heartbreaker?
He was the dumper. Total shock to his system.
I bet. This guy's built his whole identity around being the one who gets his heart broken.
Huh?
Now he has to realize that, hey, he can inflict that pain too.
It's a huge turning point for him. Relationships aren't black and white. He's not always the good guy.
And it's right around this time that we get the whole hog hunt debacle.
Yeah, the hog hunt. Talk about chaos.
It was hilarious, intense, and kind of violent all at the same time. But remember, Colin ends up seriously injured defending Lindsay from her jerk boyfriend, TOC.
It's such a pivotal scene. We see this whole different side of Colin, his courage. He's putting himself in harm's way to protect someone he cares about.
It's so different from his usual passive, overthinking approach to life.
He's not just theorizing anymore, he's actually taking action.
But what about Hollis? The buried boxes? Did we ever figure that one out?
The mystery deepens. They see her burying boxes of gut-shot textile products in a field. It's super weird.
So strange. Is she trying to tank the company? Is she stealing? What's the deal?
They're going crazy trying to figure it out. And of course, Colin can't resist digging deeper.
I mean, who could? But it's interesting how this whole mystery shifts Colin's focus outward for once.
He's not just obsessing over his own heartbreak or his theorem.
Right. He's actually getting involved in something that affects the whole town.
He's becoming part of something bigger than himself.
And eventually, the truth about Hollis comes out. And it's not what anyone expected.
So she wasn't trying to destroy the factory.
Nope. She was trying to save it. She was burying defective products to avoid a recall.
A recall that would have bankrupted the company?
And probably devastated the whole town. It's a huge risk she's taking. But it shows how much she cares about the community.
It's a selfless act. And it totally changes Lindsay's view of her mom.
She realizes Hollis isn't just this stern, distant figure. She's a woman carrying a heavy load, making tough choices for the good of everyone.
It reminds you that people are complicated. We often judge based on appearances, on limited information. There's always more to the story.
Always. And this whole situation really affects Hassan, too.
How so?
Seeing Hollis's selflessness kind of wakes him up. It's like he suddenly realizes that true meaning comes from doing something for others, you know?
Contributing to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. It's a total shift from his earlier apathy, his focus on avoiding pain.
He's been so passive, so detached, but Hollis inspires him to actually step up and make a difference.
And that leads him to a pretty big decision.
What's that?
He decides to go to college. Can you believe it?
The guy who swore off higher education? No way.
I know. It's like he's finally embracing his potential. It speaks volumes about the impact of this whole gut shot experience.
They've all been changed by the challenges they faced, by their encounters with each other.
And through it all, Colin's relationship with Lindsay keeps growing. He sees her vulnerability, her pain over her family's situation.
And how does he respond?
In true Colin fashion, of course. He camps out at her secret cave hideaway.
The cave? Really?
Yeah, it's his way of offering comfort, support, but it's also a sign of how much he's grown.
In what way?
He's putting her needs before his own, showing up for her in a way that's genuine, heartfelt.
That's big for Colin.
It is.
Yeah.
And the cave becomes this safe space for them. They can be vulnerable with each other, share their fears, their dreams.
It's beautiful. And it's in the cave that Lindsay opens up to Colin about something really personal.
What's that?
She admits that she feels like a chameleon, constantly adapting to different social situations, never really being herself.
I feel like so many people can relate to that feeling.
Right. It's that pressure to conform, to fit in. But with Colin, she feels safe enough to let her guard down.
And Colin accepts her, truly sees her for who she is. It's powerful.
And in that moment, something shifts between them. They're not just friends anymore.
The sparks are flying.
Definitely. And it leads to that beautiful scene where they share their first kiss in the cave.
Still romantic.
It's not about filling some void or proving anything. It's about genuine connection, recognizing their shared humanity.
It's a world away from Colin's previous relationships. This isn't about conquering another Katherine. It's about finding someone who sees him, challenges him, accepts him for who he is.
It's about real intimacy. And as their relationship deepens, Colin starts to question his whole theorem, his quest for predictability in love.
You think he's starting to realize that maybe the beauty of connection lies in the uncertainty?
I think so. He's starting to let go of control to embrace the unknown. You know, it's so clever how Green jumps back and forth in time. We're with Colin in Gutshot, but then we get these glimpses of his past, his relationships with all those other Katherines.
Yeah, like each Katherine is another piece of the puzzle. Helps us understand why he's so obsessed with love and heartbreak.
Totally. And those footnotes. Don't even get me started on the footnotes.
They're the best. It's like Green is having a side conversation with the reader, you know?
Exactly. Throwing in these little jokes, these random thoughts, keeps things interesting.
Definitely keeps you thinking. But one thing that really struck me about An Abundance of Katherines is how it deals with the pressure on child prodigies.
It's a huge theme. Colin's always trying to live up to that genius label, terrified of being ordinary.
Like he's got to be extraordinary all the time.
And that's a weight a lot of gifted people carry.
Yeah, it's not just about achieving. It's the emotional toll it takes, too.
You see Colin isolating himself, struggling to connect with people on a real level.
Right, like he's so focused on being exceptional that he misses out on the simple stuff.
And it's interesting, Lindsay deals with a similar kind of pressure, just in a different way.
With the whole popularity thing,
Exactly. She feels like she always has to keep up this image, hide her insecurities.
it shows how we all feel that pressure to conform, to fit in,
Huh.
It's exhausting.
Totally. Makes you wonder, is it worth it?
Yeah.
All that pretending.
And even Hassan, who at first seems totally fine with being the funny sidekick, he goes through a change too.
He does. Seeing Hollis's selflessness really gets to him. He realizes he wants more out of life.
Wants to actually make a difference.
Exactly. It's like he finally wakes up and sees his own potential.
And going to college, that's a big step for him.
It is. Shows that even those who seem content with just coasting along can be inspired to push themselves further.
It's never too late to grow, to change. And that's one of the things I love most about An Abundance of Katherines. It's hopeful.
It is. It's not about achieving some grand destiny.
It's about figuring out what matters to you.
Exactly. And sometimes those big realizations come from unexpected places, From heartbreak, from detours, from those moments when we let our guard down and connect with someone.
So as we wrap things up here, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from An Abundance of Katherines?
I hope they remember that it's okay to be yourself, even if that self isn't perfect, isn't a genius, isn't always winning. It's about those real connections, those small moments, and believing that you can always grow, always change.
So well said. And on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into An Abundance of Katherines. It's a book that makes you think, makes you laugh, and hopefully inspires you to find your own Eureka moments, whatever those might be.